The Conservative Party in the United Kingdom continues to sink in the opinion polls, but the Tory MPs have a solution. Yes, they've gotten together, written a letter to the Prime Minister Keir Starmer, urging him to support the Palestinians and recognise it as a state. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to 2C TV, your global news channel. I'm Maya 2C, and this is your latest update from British politics and the so-called Conservative Party. All right, so the Tory politicians have completely surrendered now. They've completely given up on trying to come back as a party, and they're not making it easy for all the other Tories who are trying to say, guys, we need to bring back some conservatism back to the Tory party. And so they've decided to basically say, well, how are we losing the votes? So there's a lot of, demographic changes mean that there's a lot of ethnic minorities, a lot of the Islamic communities going up. And if they're not voting Labour because they're angry at the Labour Party, maybe we should get them. I mean, that's the best thing I could say. The reality is that these Tory MPs, I'm going to go through this because there's a letter that they've written to the Prime Minister urging him to support the Palestinians, right? In reality, this is the definition of anti-Semitism because they are supporting an anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish movement. That's what they are doing. And they are doubling down. So let's go through this together. But before we do that, a massive thank you to every single person who's been watching and supporting us, because in less than 2 days, well actually within 2 days, over the last 48 hours, we've gained almost 10,000 new subscribers. Almost. I think it's about 8,000. So well done, everybody. Thank you so much. Let's continue and give you guys the latest news. Now, the Palestinian cause has become a massive issue in British politics. It affected the Labour Party. They lost a lot of votes because they believe, the Islamists and the far left believe, that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is still controlled by the Jews. And so they decided to vote for independence, for the Green Party, for anybody else. Now, the solution that some of these Tory MPs had come up with, and we're going to go through the names of, the letter that was written to the Prime Minister, it was led by a number of senior Tory MPs. We're going to go through the names that we have who signed this letter as well. But one of the gang leaders is Kit Malthouse. Now, Kit Malthouse, who looks like a Palestinian tomato himself, believes that the Jews, the Jewish nation, is expansionist, and that's a problem. And the Palestinians we need to respect the Palestinians' statehood, or whatever that means, statehood. Now, Kit is the MP for North West Hampshire. It's not necessarily that diverse, right? It is relatively, well, not that diverse. It's not like Birmingham. Let's go through the letter and we'll have some reaction to this. And I'm going to get your thoughts in the comment section in the live chat as well. All right. Dear Prime Minister. they wrote this. This is, by the way, it is being published now because it was actually written before. Dear Prime Minister, we, the undersigned Conservative parliamentarians, write to urge you to take the decisive and necessary step of formally recognizing the state of Palestine, given the increasingly perilous situation in the region, particularly the actions of the current Israeli government, which appears intent on annexing significant parts of the West Bank. It's not the West Bank, it's Judea and Samaria, but okay. We believe that the United Kingdom must act now to uphold international law and ensure that Palestinian statehood is secured on a firm legal basis. What statehood? You can't just randomly create countries and give it a fake history and say, well, let's just respect it. That's not how it works. Now, if you want to create a new country, you can always create new countries, right? Now, there's always a bit of a chaos because most of the land has been taken on this planet. But you have to be honest with people. We're going to create a new country and everything's going to be great. Now, the problem we have is that we already know that one of the reasons that a lot of these MPs are going for this, they don't want to do their own homework. They don't care about the realities. Some of them are just anti-Jewish. Some of them are falling for the propaganda that's been going on since the 1960s. That's it. Just the 1960s, by the way. That's when they created the flag coming from Jordan. Anyway, the UK has long been an advocate of a two-state solution, which successive governments have recognized as the only viable path to a just and lasting peace. Our country has consistently supported a key United Nations resolutions that affirm the rights of the Palestinian people. What Palestinian people? It's insane. Anyway, the UN Security Council Resolution 242 from 1967, I wonder why, that called for Israel's withdrawal from occupied territories. The UN General Assembly Resolution 3236 from 1974, which recognizes the Palestinian people's rights to self-determination. UN General Assembly Resolution 6719, which granted Palestine non-member observer state status, and the Resolution 2334 from 2016, which obviously says that Israel's settlement in the West Bank is no longer. So first things first, they're using the United Nations, which only came up with all this fake nonsense since the 1960s. That there was no such thing as the Muslim Arab Palestine before that. We know that. They came up with it in the 1960s, way after the State of Israel returned. Secondly, the reason that these anti-Jews, anti-Jewish Tories and everybody else, and the Labour Party the same, keep saying that, you know, we are always advocating for a two-state solution. They always say two-state solution. Why? Because they can't say Israel shouldn't exist anymore. Because number one, Israel not only exists right now, it's also very strong. So the crazy anti-Semites, they always say, you know, from the river to the sea, Jews need to go, right? That, you know, they're the crazy ones. They're the ones who know they can't say, well, Israel is a very strong country, and you know, they're very difficult to say Israel shouldn't exist, right? So they say two-state solution. That's basically what they say. Anyway, the letter says, yet despite these international commitments, the reality on the ground is deteriorating. The current Israeli government is escalating settlement expansion, actively undermining the prospects of a viable Palestinian state, and making clear its ambitions to formally annex large portions of the occupied West Bank. It's not occupied, you idiots. At the same time, there has been a sharp rise in settler violence, which, by the way, for the record, is not advocated by the Israeli government. Like, these idiots think that all the settlers and the Israeli government are going hand in hand. They don't even think. Anyway, saying that, well, the stated ambitions of senior Knesset members who openly advocated for territorial annexation and the displacement of Palestinian communities. These actions violate international law and fundamentally threaten the two-state solution. For too long, recognition of Palestine has been framed as something that should happen only at the conclusion of a negotiated settlement. However, in reality, the absence of a recognition has not facilitated negotiations. It has emboldened unilateral actions that erode the possibility of a just peace. By failing to recognize Palestine, we send a dangerous message that Palestinian statehood is conditional, while Israeli territorial expansion continues unchecked. The longer we delay, the greater the risk of a two-state solution. The Israeli expansion, the Israelis are expanding to the whole world, they're taking over everything, right? What Palestinian statehood, what Palestinian identity, you need to define what that means. Because if you're going to tell me that Palestine or Palestinians were basically Muslim Arabs, and they've always been there, you know, let's just say at least for hundreds of years, not even if not thousands, but that's a lie. That is a lie. There was never such thing called as Palestine or Palestinians in that sense. You had, that land was either British Empire, British, or Ottoman for a very, very long time. It was never independent. The last time it was actually independent was when Israel was there, back in the day, the kingdom. And the Roman Empire had it as well. The so-called Palestinians, firstly, we know where the word came from, the Roman Empire, as an insult to the Jews. Secondly, the British Empire called it the mandate, Palestinian mandate. Mostly, it didn't really mean the Muslim Arabs. It was people in the land. Guess who was there at the time? It was a messed up, different tribes, completely messed up, because nobody could control that land. You had Christians, you had Jews, you had a few Muslims who were mostly brought by the Ottoman Empire from North Africa before they fell. They brought them there. They said, you're now there to stop the Jews. Then there were also Jews living there and Christians, and they kept fighting each other, the Muslims and the Jews and everybody else, until the state of Israel returned and said, okay, so we have a country now. We're going to have this flag, but everybody can live here. Whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jewish or whatever you are, atheist, you can live here. This is your land. This is our land. We're going to just live here. We now have a flag. We now have an actual border. We're going to have an army. It's an actual country. That's all. What happened before 48 and when 1948 happened was simply all these tribes, essentially, when they were occupied by the British, by the Ottoman and everybody else, they said, let's make it a country, let's make it a proper border, and everybody could live in it. Now, most people said yes. There was still a lot of Arabs that said yes, Christians said fine. Jews obviously said, we're coming back. It was the majority of the Islamic Arabs who said, no, we don't want the Jews here, so we're going to kick off. And after 20 years, in 1960s, they were like, well, how do we do this? Well, we're going to have to create a fake history saying we were here first and this was always our land and, this is our ethnicity and our everything, Palestinian. You can't create history. Anyway, the letter also says, we're going to go through the names or whatever. We're not done with this yet because after the letter, I'm going to give you the names, name and shame, all the Tory MPs who signed this. We must be honest about the double standards in how the UK has responded to breaches of international law elsewhere. When Russia illegally annexed Crimea and invaded Ukraine, our government rightly responded with strong condemnation and support for Ukraine's sovereignty. Yet when Israel continues to expand settlements and threatens formal annexation of Palestinian land, what Palestinian land? Actions just as illegal under international law, there has been little meaningful accountability. This inconsistency undermines our credibility on the world stage. We cannot continue to demand respect for international law in one context while turning a blind eye. Okay, forget about the whole complications with Crimea. Just for the sake of the argument, let's go back to the concept that whether we like it or not, Crimea was part of a Ukrainian territory, and Ukraine has a government, Russia has a government. The Russian government ordered the Russian forces to take it, right? Now, forget about the complexity of the issue, but it was a government telling their army to take over from a different government. You have a situation where you have a number of settlers having a bit of a fight, and they're no longer taking houses, they're just building new apartments in the land. It's not necessarily government policy. It's not like Netanyahu is sending the army to take a land from a foreign government. That's not what's happening. You can't compare Russia-Ukraine, despite the complexities, to this. Anyway, he also said at the heart of this issue is not only a legal and diplomatic imperative, but also a fundamental question of human rights. For decades, the Palestinian people have endured occupation, displacement, and systemic restrictions on their basic freedoms. Recognizing Palestine would affirm our nation's commitment to upholding the principle of justice. Oh, shut up. I mean, this is just embarrassing for everybody. We also note that the change in the last government's position instituted by Lord Cameron, the Foreign Secretary, who stated that the UK should recognise Palestine as part of an irreversible process towards a two-state solution. We welcome this shift and urge the government to follow through with concrete action. Recognition should not be treated as a distant bargaining chip. I mean, okay, I'm done with this letter. Let's go through the names. They say, Prime Minister, we stand ready to offer our public support for this decision. So they're now backing Keir Starmer. They're like best friends with Keir Starmer, the Tory MPs. Let's look at this. The Right Honourable Kit Malthouse. Sir Edward Lee, Sir Desmond Swain, Sir John Hayes, Lord Soames, of course, of Fletching. That's Nicholas Soames, by the way. Lord Swire, Baroness Hodgson, Martin Vickers, Simon Hoare, Baroness Mobarek, Lord Bellingham, Sir Roger Gale, and Baroness Morrison. Morris of Bolton. Remember these names. The names that led this movement, this letter, to send it to the Prime Minister. Especially if they are your local MPs. Traitors. Not just traitors to the British Jews, traitors to reality and truth and British logic. These people don't understand anything. They are traitors to our country and to the whole world. If they can treat the Jews like this, they can treat you, the voters of Britain, the same way. And if you're watching this from around the world, if the Tories ever get back into government, they will treat you guys as the so-called allies of Britain the same way. They could betray anybody. There was some reaction to this already. Chris Rose posted, out of interest, do Tory MPs like yourself, they said it to Kit Malthouse, ever look at the Tories polling at 17% and think, you know what, I should stop being so S. You wonder why the Tories are sinking. That's just one of the reasons. Lance Foreman, former MEP, said, no one in Israel believes in a two-state solution any longer. Israel offered it six times and the Palestinians rejected. Israel gave Palestinians the opportunity to govern in Gaza. They turned it into a hellhole and started a massacre. And you support this? F off. Lance Foreman is right. On the issue of the so-called Palestinians, we're going to get to the main question as well. But Nirvana Mahmoud also said, the like of you are behind the Conservative Party's downfall. Palestine is not a British issue and should not be dragged into UK's domestic politics. She's right. This is the question. Ben Goldsmith said, has anyone actually asked the Palestinians whether they want a two-state solution? From what I can make out, the overwhelming majority of them dream of a one-state solution from the river to the sea. Westerners calling for two states, living peacefully side by side, are just posturing or living in cloud cuckoo land. That's the point. Give me evidence that 50%, just over 50% of the so-called Palestinians believe in a two-state solution. You can't even find 10%. Maybe around 10, maybe 5%, right? The vast majority don't want a two-state solution. Why are you trying to force a two-state solution on the Palestinians? They want from the river to the sea. They're not doing it because they want a country. They simply don't want the Jews to have a country. That's why they created that Palestinian fake history in the 1960s, 20 years after the State of Israel returned. Alexander Hall said, I am a local government candidate for the Conservatives next year. I have worked tirelessly for 4 years in my community and have another to go. And I sincerely wish clueless Westminster bubble misguided MPs like this would enter the real world and stop killing the party that we love. There's still a lot of good people who are part of the Tory party, and I don't understand at this point why. They've been very patient. But the direction of the party is just going down for no reason. It's like they are masochists. They don't want to come back. Patrick Christis of GB News said, this is the Tory response to getting absolutely battered at the local elections and in every single opinion poll. It kind of reminds me of what the Labour Party went through after 2010 when they decided to go with Ed Miliband as the Labour leader, and he kept just making a mess every single time. But that was more of a tactical problem with the Labour Party. The Tories, I don't think they know what they are anymore. Stephen Pollard said, "It seems a new group has been launched. Tories for terror. Reward Hamas for holding the hostages. Way to go." I think we need to make this get this go to trending on social media. Tories for terror. Hashtag Tories for terror. So embarrassing. All right. Super chat time. Thank you, Ivan, saying the Tories will do anything to hang on. Hang on to what? Stu says Tories know they will never get the right vote, so they want to take Labour's place as they fall. That's the thing. I mean, for these Tory MPs, it's not necessarily some sort of tactical move to get the Palestinian or the Islamist vote. They're not even that smart. They always hated the Jews. These MPs that I read, the part of the letter, who signed the letter, you read, you heard, you saw the letter itself. The language, the tone, the way they were talking about the current Israeli government. They don't even know anything about the history of the land, of the people, everything that area, that region has gone through. Ivan also says, I'm sure the Tories shouted the loudest about anti-Semitism. Well, they did when it suited them. when the Labour Party was going through the anti-Semitic crisis with Jeremy Corbyn, it suited the Tories to shout about this. It's just self-destruction. Tories for terror. Don't forget. Going back to some of the other super chats, we got Aztec saying, is it possible that the whole of the UK has contracted the mad cow disease? Probably. Well, not the whole of the UK, at least the political class, yeah. I think, actually, at this point, the only party that's not openly anti-Semitic is basically the Reform UK. Because even the Lib Dems, you have a lot of crazy Lib Dems, the Liberal Democrats, and the SNP and all the others. Aristotle Plato says, to quote Harris Sultan recently, Britain is dying. Or to quote Maya Tusi, Britain is dead. I suggest that all UK patriots and Jews ask Trump for asylum status from the nutters. It's becoming extremely difficult and unsafe to continue living in the United Kingdom, unfortunately. Nick says, not only what Palestinian state, the so-called Palestinians don't want a state. That's the whole point. They rejected it 6 times. Actually, more than that, if you count all the other informal times that they were offered. They just want the Jews to go away. That's the mission. Laura says, the final nail in the coffin, folks. Rest in peace, Conservative and Unionist Party. Time for a fresh and true blue Unionist and Loyalist Party for us in Scotland, if the Scottish Tories don't revolt against this. The problem with the Scottish Tories is that they don't really have full autonomy anyway to run their own party independently, properly from the official Tory party. So on the one hand, they are technically separate. They have their own leader. On the other hand, they are fully controlled by the Tories in London. So this is why it's a lose-lose, this whole Scottish Tory nonsense that they've created. Paul says, can we put in a class action asylum claim to the US? I think the whole country at this point need to do that, right? Palestinians do not want a state, they want refugee money into perpetuation. Well, they simply, the whole point is, by the way, if you're Palestinian, in case you don't know, you get a permanent refugee status. Doesn't matter where you are on this planet. It's a privilege. You get permanent refugee status, which means anywhere you go, you can get whatever you want. It's the only group of people that have that. Anyway, well, I love how they say Israel is expanding, considering that Israel lost a big chunk of the land voluntarily. They gave it away in 2005 when they left Gaza, which should be part of Israel. That part has nothing to do with the so-called Palestinians. But the Islamist nutters from Egypt made it difficult. Christie says that the Palestinians had the freedom to choose their own government for 20 years, and they chose Hamas. If they wanted a nationhood, they needed to act like a legitimate country. But this is the other part of the problem. When you say Palestine, where? You got Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, which is this bit, and then inside it could be like which part. And then you got all the way to the other side, this side, down here, Gaza, which has nothing to do with this side. And each side is governed by two different types of people. In Gaza, you can't even find the actual so-called Palestinian flag. It's just full of Hamas flags. None of it makes any sense. Will the US take us as refugees? I hope so after this mess. There have been a lot of conversations actually coming from the White House in terms of giving more refugee status, asylum to Brits, because things are not going too well for a lot of people in Britain and some other people in other European countries. But especially in Britain, the whole thing is going down badly. Anyway. They started planning October the 7th during COVID. I knew it. I knew it would be declared a global pandemic on March 11th, 2020. To be fair, by that point, it was already too late anyway. that was when they were showing us all these weird videos from Italy and China where people were just having a fit on the street. And they were saying, that's COVID. People were like shaking on the ground and there were coffins everywhere. And I was like, everybody panicked. Like, well, that wasn't real, was it? Candace says, we Americans stand with Tory. He stood with us against the Biden, and we stand with him against the English knobs in Parliament. English knobs. Hashtag respect. Well, thank you, Candace, and all the lovely, lovely Americans out there watching Tory TV. Yeah, George Galloway years ago received official Gazan citizenship. That was a beautiful thing about the propaganda coming from George Galloway, because the one thing, because he's an Islamist. George Galloway is an Islamist, and he had a bit of a row with the Palestinian Authority, well, his supporters, his side. And there was a bit of a division between, well, the British anti-Semites, like Jeremy Corbyn and George Galloway's side, and which part of the Palestinian side they should support. It was an embarrassing moment when Jeremy Corbyn was hanging out with Hamas and Hezbollah, and he was calling them brothers. And then the Palestinian Authority has now obviously been governed by Mahmoud Abbas for about 50 million years. Were trying to distance themselves. Things got so bad that Mahmoud Abbas was like, well, yeah, it's probably best not to hang out with George Galloway or Jeremy Corbyn guys, because it's not a good look. How embarrassing. British politicians, a crazy nutter in Judea and Samaria, like, it's probably best not, because they keep hanging out with Hezbollah and Hamas. And now we have to deal with the Tory party. The Conservative Party, the Conservative and Unionist Party, and these MPs, and let's not forget, they're not just MPs in the House of Commons, but you also have the members of the House of Lords, the Lords and Baronesses. They're all signing the letter. Don't ever forget the names that I showed you during this live stream as part of that letter. Anyway, once again, big thank you, because over the last couple of days we've gained around 10,000 new subscribers. We're now at 817,000. We're going to continue to keep going. The road to 1 million continues. Let's get there before Christmas. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.